Welcome back for another deep dive. This time, we're going to be taking a look at G. Polya's How to Solve It. And you know what? It's a book about math, but you
Ah,
might be surprised to hear that it's about way more than just math.
that's right. It really is.
Ah,
Even though it uses mathematical examples, Polya's work is really about approaching any kind of problem in a clear, systematic way.
wow. Okay, so this book was published back in 1945, and you're telling me it's still relevant today? Like, what's the secret sauce? What makes this book so timeless?
Well, I think Polya's genius was in breaking down this whole problem-solving process into 4 phases.
Mm.
It's like he gives you a roadmap that anyone can follow, and it doesn't matter if you're trying to solve an algebra equation or like a real-life dilemma.
I love a good red map. Okay, so
That
tell me more about it. What are these phases?
Okay, so the first thing you got to do is understand the problem itself.
Mm-hmm.
Now that might sound kind of obvious, but Polya actually gives us the tools to like really dissect it.
Okay.
Then the next step is to devise a plan.
Uh-huh.
Then you're going to carry out that plan. And finally, you look back and reflect on the whole process.
So it's not just about finding the answer, it's about the whole process.
Exactly.
That's really interesting. And to illustrate these phases, Polya uses this example
He
of
does.
trying to calculate the diagonal of a parallel piped.
That's right. And you know, while most of us
Yeah.
probably don't face that exact problem every day, the steps that he outlines to solve that problem are universally applicable. So just imagine, you're trying to make a big decision like changing careers. Polya's phases can help you there too.
Yeah, okay. So walk me through this a little bit. I'm imagining myself. I'm trying to figure out this career change, but I don't even know where to start.
Okay.
How do I begin to understand this problem?
Well, I think Polya would say that you should start by asking yourself the right questions.
Okay.
Things like, what do I really want out of a career?
Mm-hmm.
Or what skills do I have and what skills need more development? And asking these questions helps to clarify your thinking.
It's almost like you go through life and you're just making all of these assumptions about yourself and the world.
You do.
And you don't even realize you're making these assumptions, and this forces you to
Yeah.
shine a light on them.
Yeah. Yeah, we all do. And speaking of assumptions, Polya actually tells this funny story about a Mr. John Jones in the book. And this Mr. John Jones never questions any of his assumptions, and he ends up making some pretty terrible decisions because of it.
Oh, wow.
And so it's a good reminder for all of us to remember to challenge our own biases when we're going through this problem-solving process.
So step one is all about self-awareness and asking yourself those really tough questions. But what about actually coming up with a plan? Like, does Polya actually give us concrete strategies for this?
He does, yeah. He introduces this really powerful concept called heuristic reasoning. And it's a practical approach where you use educated guesses, trial and error, and rules of thumb to just kind of move forward, even if you don't have all of the information yet.
So it's less about like having some magical equation or formula for every situation,
Right.
and it's more about being resourceful and adaptable.
Exactly. And this isn't just limited to math either.
Mm.
Think about it. Like a doctor who's diagnosing a patient,
Uh-huh.
or you're sitting there and you're trying to solve a really tricky crossword puzzle.
Yeah.
You're using what you know, and you're making some educated guesses to just try to fill in the blanks.
I'm starting to see how this goes way beyond equations. This is a way of thinking.
Yes.
So Paul, you're saying this heuristic reasoning isn't just, random guessing.
Oh, absolutely not.
Mm-mm.
He provides a framework for thinking in this way.
Okay.
And it's really meant to guide us to be more strategic and effective in our problem solving.
This is making me think a lot about how I approach challenges in my own life. A lot of times I'm guilty of just jumping straight into solutions without really taking the time to properly understand the problem first.
Yeah, that's a really common trap, I think. But with Polya's method, you're equipped to actually tackle those problems with a lot more confidence and clarity.
Okay, so far we've talked about understanding the problem, and then we've talked about devising a plan using heuristic reasoning.
Right.
What comes next on Polya's roadmap?
Okay, so now it's time to actually carry out the plan, and this is the part where you put those heuristics into action and see what works. You're testing those hypotheses.
This sounds like the part where things can get a little messy.
It can.
Are there any tips or strategies that Polya gives us for navigating this phase of the process?
Yeah, he really emphasizes the importance of staying flexible and being persistent.
Okay.
You might hit some roadblocks along the way.
Uh-huh.
You might have to kind of adjust your approach or, maybe even start over.
Right.
But that's okay. That's all part of the process.
So it's not about finding the perfect solution on the first try. It's about iterating,
Exactly.
refining as you go.
Yeah, yeah. And he also encourages us to look for analogies like, can we think about a time when we've solved a similar problem?
Oh, I like that. It's like, you're working on something and then suddenly you have that aha moment
Yes.
where you're like, oh, I've done something like this before.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And he actually uses this really fascinating example in the book from geometry,
Okay.
where he compares finding the center of gravity in a triangle versus finding it in a tetrahedron.
Okay, now bear with me. My geometry is a little rusty.
That's the
How does that help us solve problems in everyday life?
Well, it's really about the principle behind it. You
Hmm.
know,
Hmm.
it's about recognizing patterns and then applying those insights that we gain to new situations.
Okay.
So even if you don't remember like all the specifics about triangles and tetrahedrons,
Right.
the principle still applies.
So by like drawing these connections to our past experiences, we can kind of unlock new solutions.
Exactly.
That's really cool. Are there any other strategies that Polyer recommends for this carrying out the plan phase?
Yeah, he talks about this idea of working backward.
Okay.
And sometimes if you start with the desired outcome
Mm-hmm.
and then you kind of reverse engineer the steps to get there,
Yeah.
it can actually be a really effective way to solve the problem.
Oh, you know what that reminds me of? It reminds me of those logic puzzles
Yes.
where they give you the end result and you have to kind of work your way back to figure out like where it all started.
Exactly. Exactly. And, even if you can't completely work backward in a problem,
Yeah.
it can at least give you some valuable clues and insights that can help you move forward.
This is making me realize how much we get stuck in this like linear way of thinking.
We do.
We assume we have to start at the beginning and just go step by step until we get to the end.
Right.
But sometimes that's just not the most effective way.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
And POLYA encourages us to really explore those different paths and approaches.
Yeah. You know what else I was thinking about? Just the importance of visualization in this whole process.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about Polya's emphasis on drawing figures?
Yeah, absolutely. He has a whole section in the book about this.
He does.
He
Yeah.
does. And, he argues that even just like a rough sketch
Wow.
can really help us to clarify the relationships that we're dealing with and reveal any hidden insights that we might not have seen otherwise.
It's almost like, when you draw something, it's like you're giving your brain a visual roadmap.
You are.
It just makes it so much more tangible.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be, just pen and paper.
Right.
You can use diagrams, flow charts,
Yeah.
even physical models
Uh-huh.
to really represent the problem in a more concrete way,
So just to recap, we talked about understanding the problem.
right?
Then we talked about coming up with a plan.
Yes.
And we've even talked about carrying out that plan with flexibility and using all of these tools and strategies.
We have.
What's the final step on Polya's problem-solving roadmap?
Well, the last step is looking back. It can be tempting to just celebrate the solution and move on. But Polya says that this step is actually crucial.
So it's more than just checking your work and making sure you didn't make any mistakes. What exactly does looking back involve?
It's about reflecting on the whole process,
Mm-hmm.
like asking yourself, could I have solved this in a different way? What did I learn from this? And how can I use what I learned to solve other problems in the future?
It's like taking every problem and turning it into a learning opportunity instead of just viewing it as a task to be completed.
Exactly, yeah. And he wants us to take our solution and examine it from different angles, like asking, can I simplify this solution? Can I make it more general? And can I use what I learned from this problem to solve other problems that might seem totally unrelated?
That reminds me of how we talked about analogies earlier.
Yes.
It's like we're building up this mental library of problem-solving patterns, and we can draw from those in the future.
That's a great way to put it. And Polya gives us specific questions to guide this reflection, like, can you check your result? Can you derive the result in a different way?
Yeah.
And can you use the result or the method for some other problem?
It's like he's giving us this framework to continuously get better,
Right.
Not just to solve that one problem, but to just become better problem solvers in general.
That's really what it's all about. And that's the real power of his work.
Yeah.
It's not about learning formulas or techniques. It's about cultivating a mindset, a way of approaching challenges with curiosity and creativity and just this willingness to learn from every experience.
This has honestly completely changed how I think about solving problems. I used to feel so frustrated when I couldn't figure out a solution right away.
Right.
But now, thanks to this deep dive, I see it more as an opportunity for growth.
I love that.
Yep.
And remember, what we've talked about today isn't limited to just math. You can use Polya's methods for any challenge that you face,
Yeah.
whether it's something personal, a creative project, or even like a difficult decision at work.
Well, on that note, it's time to wrap up our deep dive into how to solve it. I'm curious, what problem are you going to tackle next, armed with these new insights from Polya? Thanks for joining us.